hit record now. And I'm also going to do AI just because it's a bit helpful just in terms of notes or things that we need to follow up on. So just be aware of that. And with that being said, can you all see my screen? Can you see the slides? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Well then, let's get started. So I'm hoping y'all are here for the non-participating states award conversation because that's what today's conversation is about. And like say, I just have a few slides and I anticipate that some of the information regarding the actual funding is not going to be any new surprise to any of you. But I wanted to make sure that we had ample information just regarding the funding and requirements. So a little bit about the award information that WISAC was given. The award is a 3-year award, and we were awarded it in October of 23. We were awarded $1,140,000. And because we're starting a little bit late, and Laurel, you can explain that better, the timeline is a little bit off, but we did get that full amount of funding.
Yes, and so technically the award was made October 1 of last year. We weren't notified until March of last year that we'd actually received the funding. We had to do a budget modification, which wasn't done until June or accepted until June. Then I had to complete a grant manager training, which wasn't held until July. So that kind of explains the delay in getting the funding out. I hope it explains it. I'm sorry.
So of this funding, WISAC, we intend to distribute approximately $880,000 of that in subawards. We're doing everything we can to really get as much of that money as we can into communities for you all who work directly with youth. With that being said, we are separating our compliance inspections. We're hoping to contract that out. So we have set aside an additional $80,000 for that. And we're working with WASCOP to hopefully get an inspector or two to help us with those secure facility inspections. So we're looking at doing, breaking this larger project into year-long projects, with the first project running from January 1st, 25 through December 31st, 25. And we are going to be giving out approximately $550,000 of this entire award to juvenile serving entities throughout the state of Wyoming for that project year. So we're encouraging counties and state entities to apply. Some important dates to be aware of. We had an informational webinar yesterday. The link was broken, so I'm really glad today's link worked and it went smoother getting on. So it's good to see you all, and I'm glad that you were able to connect. So we're going to record, as I said, today's session, and we recorded yesterday's for those who cannot attend. So after today's conversation ends, you'll be able to find those on our website next week, probably, but you can direct anybody who maybe wasn't able to attend to those recordings. The request for proposal for subaward funding, we're hoping to release, we're not hoping to, we are going to release it come Monday. So we'll be sending that out via email to CGSB groups, as well as posting it on the WISAC website and having that posted, hopefully on SACJJ. Brandon said he thought he could get that on there for us. We want to ensure, because we don't want this to be a competitive process, and I know RFP sometimes can sound like a big deal, and of course it's a big deal, it's federal funding, but really we don't want it to be so much as competitive as we want it to be a way, again, just for counties throughout the state to be able to support juveniles and get us moving towards compliance with the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. So you can see that we're going to have a place for questions. We'll be posting those to our website along with answers. as well as offering individual technical assistance to anybody who wants to apply, just to allow us time to ensure that we're able to get questions answered and offer that assistance. We are going to put a deadline of that at November 4th so that we have time to get that in place before proposals are due to us by the 14th of November. We're going to meet with the grants committee, which includes SAC-JJ, grants committee members, and hoping to have sub-award decisions made by December 6th for project year to begin January 1st. So that was a mouthful, and I want you all to know that we recognize this is a quick turnaround, and I'm sure there are going to be some bumps along the way just in terms of getting contracts out and that sort of information, because there's always bumps. But again, I think we just want to have a timeline in place so that we can get the money out as quickly as possible. Any questions on this? Okay, so this is where we're going to review. Again, probably review for most of you anyway. The JJDPA Act strives to prevent and respond to juvenile delinquency, improve the juvenile justice system, and set standards to obviously take care of our juveniles. And one of the important pieces too is really looking at youth that are already being served within the juvenile justice system, and to prevent youth from entering further into the system if they are already involved. Wyoming is not in compliance with the act, and with that, that's why WISAC received that non-participating state funding. The non-participating state funding is intended to be used to, quote unquote, carry out activities that fall under the core requirements of the Formula Grants Title II Part B program. So just remembering that our core requirements really are about deinstitutionalization of status offenders, separation, sight and sound of juveniles from adult inmates, removal of juveniles from adult jails and lockups, and identifying any racial and ethnic disparities. So as you all are thinking about what a proposal could look like, just ensuring that the proposals, you can make ample evidence as to how your proposal and what those activities are connect back to these core requirements.
Yes, and sorry about jumping in.
Oh, jump in.
One or more, so don't think your project has to deal with all four. If you have a project that's just focused on removing status offenders from detention, that's okay.
And eligible project activities, and I don't think that this will be a surprise for most of you. One thing that Laurel brought up yesterday, which isn't included in here, is food too. So no, like with your activities as you describe that, food for youth is also not something that can be included. I'm not going to read it all because you all are very intelligent and can read it yourself, but are there any questions on that? Additional requirements, and we're going to start out with that, just conversation about the 10% cap on personnel costs. I know that this is challenging, and I know this for several reasons, and that I've heard from several counties concern about applying for this funding, knowing that it can't be used to pay wages for your direct staff beyond that 10% cap. And know that Laurel and I both recognize, I'm speaking for you, Laurel, that this is a challenge, because I know that for nonprofit, agencies and direct service providers, and I know this is a direct service provider myself in the past, that, main cost comes down to wages for staff. So know that we recognize this as a barrier, and we'll get to conversation about just some project activity ideas. outside of that. But when you're thinking about your proposal, really think about the what you do and what you want to spend the money on versus who you want to have do that, because it kind of helps separate then what might be an allowable cost above and beyond that 10% versus what might not be. We also have, and I might have you just tackle a couple of these, Laurel. I don't know if you heard back regarding our comprehensive risk assessment.
Oh, I have some information, a little bit of information. So part of the university's process, anytime the university makes a subaward, is a comprehensive risk assessment. And I think part of this is also required by Office of Justice programs too. But what it involves is, let me tell you, you'll receive several forms to fill out. They're based on your audit and financial system. The forms also ask questions about potential conflict of interest or any and things like that. There is a template form that the university uses for risk assessment. The university has a ranking system to determine if the subawardee is low, medium, or high risk. And then the university and the subawardee develop a subaward plan based off of that. So this risk assessment is something that's handled not by YSAC, it's handled by Campus Office of Sponsored Programs, I believe. And so we'll have somebody available to work with everyone. And even, honestly, I don't know what goes into determining whether someone's low, medium, or high risk. But let's say based on the university's assessment, the subawardee is considered high risk. All that does is change the monitoring plan. It doesn't mean you won't get your funding. And I'll try and get more information about that. I'll put it on the website, but that's something I've never been involved in. It's a completely different department on campus, but I'll get more information and we can put that up on the website with all of this other information too.
Background and fingerprint checks are a requirement for direct care staff in working with juveniles, which I don't think is a surprise to most people. With that, there are some determination of suitability requirements that OJ puts in place too. So part of the process of using your funding is ensuring that you have direct care staff that have gone through those background and fingerprint checks and basically pass, right? So that we know that they're safe to work with kids. So we will have a checklist that will be included as part of the RFP for your review. For those that work with DFS licensing, I don't think most of it will be a surprise. YSAC will cover the cost of any fingerprinting or background checks. If you don't do that, or if you anticipate having new staff to run the programs and the activities that you are proposing. I recognize especially that the fingerprint process in and of itself in certain communities can be challenging. Just due to staff shortages and, if it's sheriff offices running that or police department. So we do recognize that that's still a barrier. So wanted you all to be aware of it now so that if you need to get that process started, you can reach out and let us know and we can help out on that. There is a limit on indirect costs, and Laurel, you're much more familiar with this, so I'll let you tackle this bullet.
Sure. You may include indirect costs in your budget when you submit it. If your organization, your county already has a negotiated indirect cost rate with the federal government, you can apply that. So for example, the university's indirect cost rate, negotiated indirect cost rate is 34%. So if you have one, you may include that in your budget. If you have a negotiated indirect cost rate, please send us your form along with your proposal so that campus can review that, and it needs to be not expired. If you're in the process of negotiating a new rate, just let us know and we can work on how to handle that. If you do not have a negotiated indirect cost rate, you can include a 10% indirect cost rate in your budget.
Laurel, I have to pop out just for a quick question. So if
Sure.
you could just tackle those last two, I will be right back.
Absolutely. There are data reporting requirements that YSAC has to give data back to OJJDP. I think a lot of people are already involved in reroute. That is our strongly preferred way of collecting data for this project. It's completely free to use. I think everybody on here has seen it before. Happy to do a demo again. Happy to talk about any concerns county attorneys may have about data sharing, but that is really our preference for collecting the data for this grant. And if for some reason can't get your county attorney on board with the data sharing agreement, then we can talk about alternative ways to collect data. But reroute really will be the easiest way for us, and I think the easiest way for you to collect data that we need to report back to OJJDP. And then invoicing. So you'll know how much funding you'll receive once the grants committee makes the determination, reviews the proposals, and then there's monthly invoicing where you send your invoice to the university and it'll be paid out. And that'll be working on those invoices will be a combination of myself, Brooke, our admin, and then another office on campus. So hopefully that's a pretty streamlined process, and we'll work out those details with each county individually once the awards are made.
So again, recognizing that, that 10% cap on personnel costs can be challenging. We did some work on just looking at the different activity types that are allowable under this funding and just some ideas. So I know this is a lot of words just to run through real quick, and I don't want to read it word by word. But as you think about just data collection and reporting, thinking about, are there programs that you're currently running that would be an appropriate fit tying back to those 4 core requirements under the JJDPA, and that you would like maybe some support in evaluating? Are there pre-post surveys? Is there just a way that you really want to look at your program strategically to see what's working and what's not? In terms of activities, events, training to support the program, think about supplies and equipment that you might use in work with juveniles. Staff development and trainings. Do you have maybe a coordinator from a program that would really benefit from an in-depth training elsewhere? Because this funding can be used to pay for travel expenses as well as the training itself. Program curriculums, assessments. An important thing to think about too, when I said think about what it is that you do versus who does it, to kind of be able to separate that out. There is ability with your funding to contract out. So if you're in need, say, of contracting with a mental health provider for substance abuse evaluations, or to come in and offer groups that would be a complement to your program that you already have in place, consider that. A lot of these other ones I don't think are a surprise, and I know that with VOA in the past, there had been use just in conversation with multiple counties about like use of electronic monitoring or alternatives to jail. This also falls under like, are there ways that you can support crisis bed placement and contracting maybe with specialists to come in and offer some de-escalation training or conflict mediation. So think about those pieces: program curriculum, program supplies, And then this last piece really is about strategies devoted to identifying and reducing any racial and ethnic disparities among youth who are involved in the system. And are there ways that you can get creative within your county and within your programs to look at ways to use funds in this capacity? So again, that was a lot of words and that was a mouthful. But with that, really, this is our last slide because I think our hope more than anything was to provide some general information, but then to just have conversation with you all in terms of needs, questions that you have, ideas you might have about eligible activities that might support other counties or other entities who are interested in applying. So with that, I'm going to shut up for a few minutes and allow some conversation on this point.
And since Jen is here, you had talked about renting space, I guess, as an idea of how you could use the funding. And that is allowable. There are certain conditions. The cost of renting the space can't exceed comparable prices for similar spaces. You can't charge the cost of space for periods of non-occupancy. You can't charge rent if the subawardee owns the building or has a financial interest in the property. No construction, obviously. And cost for rental of any property owned by individuals or entities affiliated with the recipient or subrecipient for purposes such as home office workspace are unallowable, and the cost of related utilities is also unallowed. And so I can send you this, and if there's questions about any of those things, we can talk them through or get additional information.
We
So does
did have, oh, sorry.
No, you can go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we did have a question yesterday from one county just about juvenile detention and if that was still, you know, any placement costs like daily rate or transportation too, if that was still an appropriate use of funding, and that would be. Obviously, we want to do what we can to keep juveniles from having to be placed and held in an adult facility, and know also that we recognize barriers across Wyoming, just in it being a rural state in terms of getting a youth to a juvenile holding facility. And we know that there are barriers too, just in terms of some counties accepting youth from different counties into those facilities. But know that that is an appropriate use of funding too. How about other questions?
Has anyone given any thought to what they can do with this money in your individual communities? Or maybe what you've done in the past when VOA managed the funding?
This is Dan in Sheridan. I believe when VOA managed it, I don't think there was any limitation on what went to personnel. So, and you guys know this, you've heard it. That's always our primary need, and we're limited with that. We just have to look at salaries and benefits. And the biggest service I feel we provide to our juveniles is our officers, meeting with them directly, and helping them navigate and kind of problem solve some of the issues that they're having and that sort of thing. So again, you know, the 10% is a big disappointment. for that, and without personnel, other projects don't really have a priority for that. But again, I know I'm preaching to the choir, just saying, but I believe as up until the very end that we had it before it was put on hold, there wasn't any limitation on that. I'll say with CJSB funding too, that's, probably all of what we use our funding for is to help support the payment for our juvenile officers for that. So that's our biggest need, and it'll be a challenge to see how what we can utilize funding for.
Yeah, I totally hear that, and I think that's a big reason why VOA couldn't do it anymore, because even we are limited by the 10% cap, but the benefit of being at the university is there are other people on campus who do this, handle a lot of the back end work, like managing the subawards. So I think that's a big reason why UW kind of stepped in to administer this. But yes, it's definitely a challenge, and hopefully OJJDP will see that for future awards. But I'm not holding my breath, but I definitely do see the challenge with that 10% limit.
Well, and in the past, we did use a portion of it for detention costs, but Sheridan's, we've really done a good job reducing how many youth we're sending to detention, but we do have our local group home. I guess we can maybe use some of the funding for that as well, but it's so unpredictable. You don't know when kids are going to go, so it's kind of difficult to make that budget. Additionally, when we made changes before, like if our budget was for 2 items and then later we thought of a third, was a little difficult to change the budget request once we had already submitted it. Do you know if that's going to be possible with this grant? Like, let's say we budget for group home funding and then we don't end up using however much. Is it going to be difficult to move, we budgeted 25,000 for group home stuff and we really only used 10, so can we move that remaining 15 to a different spot, or is that not going to be allowed?
So it's definitely allowed. To my understanding, what would have to happen is you let us know that you want to make that change, you make a revised budget, and then we send that up to OJJDP and they approve it or don't approve it. I don't know why they wouldn't, but so it's allowed from my standpoint. It just may take time because it has to go all the way up to the project officer to make the change. But I don't see why that would be too hard to do. And it is possible that maybe we are able to make that change ourselves as the main awardee, but I'll have to look into that. I do know it is very difficult to move things between budget categories. And only if so let's say you budgeted $25,000 in procurement contracts to have group home beds, but then instead you decide you want to spend $25,000 on travel to conferences. If that budget category, if travel was 0, then that's a little more challenging to move funding into a category that didn't exist in your budget originally. And then there's some rules about how much the subaward is and what percentage the change is, whether it requires extra permission. But we can definitely look into that. But also we can go through whatever process is required. It's not off the table.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Laurel or Brooke, this is Dan again. Would you remind, just kind of from my my own edification and that, I'm sure I've heard it before, and Jen has talked about it and that. Can you just kind of share your understanding of Wyoming is considered non-participating and what that means?
Sure, so the JJDPA has certain requirements. Among them are the four core requirements addressing holding juveniles in detention. And Wyoming as a state has chosen not to participate in the JJDPA requirements. And for whatever reason, I think part of it is that it's probably very difficult to comply. There are established metrics for violation rates. So you're non-compliant if the violation rate for sight and sound separation is 0. So if it's just not possible at this time to meet that standard, then that you may choose not to participate. I think currently Texas is the other non-participating state. So since the state doesn't formally participate in the JJDPA, the state is not eligible to receive this money. In all other participating states, the state actually receives this money. And so since Wyoming as a state is not eligible, the money is made available to anyone else in the state to try to carry out the activities to meet the core requirements. Does that answer your question?
It does. So who for the state makes that decision? Is that legislated? Is that the judicial branch? Is that it seems like that might be an issue for down the road as a goal to have. And I know the mentality of Wyoming and that, but if I guess just out of curiosity and something that can be thinking of whether legislators need to be petitioned or a particular branch of the government.
Yeah, I think it would have to be legislators, because I think you would have to have some ability to say, Park County, and I'm just using them as an example. I know nothing about Park County. You'd have to be able to tell Park County, like, look, you can't put status offenders in jail or detention, and have them buy into it and agree and get behind meeting that requirement. Because if the state's receiving the funding and any county in the state is not willing to come into compliance, then Wyoming's not in compliance again, and that funding can get pulled. So I think it really need buy-in from every single county in the state. And I think sometimes the way things currently are, it's just not possible. If there is no secure place to hold kids available in a county, then you can't be in compliance. So I think we'd have to do a lot of work to make it possible to be in compliance.
Thank you.
So good luck to you if you're gonna take that on.
Go Dan.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not taking it on. I'm close to retirement. I'm just thinking of the good of the state.
No, we picked you. You've been voluntold.
How about other questions and thoughts?
Amanda?
I apologize. This is Amanda from Natoma. I apologize for being late. So hopefully I can review the recording of the first 15 or 20 minutes that I missed, and I might have to come back at you with a call with more
No
questions.
worries.
And then obviously I'll come back to the board and flush out any ideas that might fit this grant.
Gus, have you gotten the funding in the past from Craig or VOA?
Were you talking to me? Sorry.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, the VOA grant. Yeah. Yeah, I did that until it went away. And so it's good this is coming back. So
Do you know, or have you given any thought to how you're going to be able to use the funding, given the 10% cap?
not a whole lot. A lot of stuff I've just been doing through the CJSB budget.
Mhm.
So I'll have to look in and talk to like the group home and stuff here in Evanston, see if they can benefit from any of this funding. It would be useful for some drug and alcohol evaluations, though. I've came across that where the juvenile or parent can't pay
Mhm.
to get an eval. So that will be helpful as well if I can use it for that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Cool.
So, oh, sorry, Gus.
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
I was just gonna make sure, I don't know if I stated at the beginning, so the RFP is requesting proposals, not apply for more than $50,000 for the first project year. Know that it's not a competitive process. We really want to get money out to everybody. And we don't know how many applications are going to come in for the funding. So amounts determined will be based on how many apply as well as need, and really ensuring that proposals fit with that scope of those core requirements. So just some things to think about.
Okay.
But the evaluations, drug and alcohol evaluations are a good use of the money, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and don't
Absolutely.
feel pressured to ask for the full 50,000. If you have a $20,000 idea, that's totally fine too. You don't have to ask for the whole 50.
Okay. All right.
You can,
Hey,
you don't have to.
Okay.
did we get confirmation on whether our contracted staff, I can't remember the term that you use when you talk about that. If those folks have to be fingerprinted and, it has to be within the last 6 months.
I have not gotten the answer to that back yet. What about you, Chris and Mark? Did you get funding from Craig before, and do you have any thoughts on what you might want to do this time?
In Teton County, we used to get the funding to help pay our on-call staff for our staff secure holding facility within our group home. And that was more or less of a contract with the county. And basically we would pay for our on-call staff with these funds, which was great, but under the new parameters, that probably wouldn't work. Well, I know it wouldn't work. It seems like, I think that point about paying for substance abuse evaluations for kids in our diversion program could be really helpful. Or training would be probably the most viable areas where we could use these funds.
And so you are not with the county?
No, we're
Okay.
nonprofit.
Okay. And who is would the county contract with your nonprofit to have the on-call staff, or do you contract? Who employs the staff?
We employ the staff.
And the town?
But so would the loophole be if the county was the actual recipient of these funds, they could subcontract with us and then it would be allowable?
So don't say subcontract. I think if the county was the recipient of the funds, they could contract with you to provide like the crisis bed or the service of turn your activity into a service that can be contracted. And not a staff expense that they're paying, if that makes sense.
That does make sense.
Okay, yes. Yes, so if Teton County is the recipient and they are contracting with you to provide them a service of crisis beds, and with the crisis bed cost includes someone to monitor the bed, that is different. That's a procurement contract and not a staff expense.
Okay.
Because so, and YSAC is contracting with somebody to do
Yeah.
the compliance inspections, which is like 99% a person doing the inspections. But it's a contract and not a subaward.
Oh, okay.
So
So the
Laurel,
county
that,
could-
I'm
The
sorry.
county could purchase a service from Teton Youth and Family Services.
Yes.
Okay. That's helpful.
Dan, did you have a?
Yeah, I was just, so the person you're hiring for the compliance checks, it's done in a way where you're able to use pay for more than 10% of that with the grant.
Yes, because we're contracting with them, not hiring.
Okay.
Laurel, this is Mark, and since I started with in 2021, I'm not aware of how much funding we've got from OJJDP in the past. I do have some ideas for the application, so and of course I also need to look at the recording because I missed the first 15 minutes, so like Amanda did, so.
Yeah, so I think Jen and Chris and Gus can speak to how much money was available in the past in subawards and how much each individual county got. I'm not sure of that. But yeah, I think 50,000 is more than was typically available.
Sheridan County got like 16, 15, 16 around the last year. And I'm not quite sure what kind of formula they were using. You know, the State Advisory Council was kind of reviewing those applications previously also, and just like the process with this one. So I don't know if they had kind of a formula structure that they were judging that was a little more competitive than what you folks are doing.
Yeah, and I think part of Craig's process was population based, which I guess there's reasons for and against that, but yeah, I think the goal is to fund everyone. The real role of the grants committee and YSAC in that determination is making sure that the activities proposed can be directly tied to one or more of the core requirements.
Brandon's not on today, but I think CJSB is based a lot on population also, so that may have been part of where they're getting that formula structure from.
Yeah.
I think so.
Forgive me if this was already reviewed, but I remember one of the reasons why Natrona didn't apply for or receive the VOA funding for probably 20 plus years. I believe one of the police departments wouldn't participate in the compliance. Is that still a requirement of every police department in the county has to be on board?
Nope. So, yeah, I think as part of the VOA application, you had to have your sheriff's office or police chief sign off on compliance inspections. But our plan is really to work on that side with relationship building and really partnering with WASCOP and picking a good compliance inspector to build relationships. But so that that part of your responsibility is, you don't need to worry about that. I mean, any relationships you can help us build, that would be great. But you guys can just focus on providing your services, and we'll work with Westcop to get the compliance inspections going.
I apologize. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but you seem to be going on mute every 3 minutes.
Oh, no.
So I think it's probably on my end.
Did you hear?
That it's not our responsibility.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then I guess my next question and another concern that Natrona's always had is, since we haven't done the VOA grant in many years, we didn't want to jump in and then take funding away from other counties that had been applying and receiving. So is this kind of a fresh slate per se? That if we applied, we wouldn't be then taking away from, Sheridan having that 16,000 for many years.
Yeah, so this time I think a lot more of the total award is available. Because the same way the subawardees are limited to 10%, YSAC's also limited to 10% of the funding. And I, based on the conversation we had yesterday and conversations we've had prior, I think initially a lot of counties are probably going to be looking for a smaller amount of funding just because of that 10% limit. So all this to say, please apply. I think there's enough money to go around. And if
Okay.
worst case scenario, all 23 counties apply for 50,000, we'll work on that if that happens, but I don't think it's gonna happen.
Thank you.
I would say too, Amanda, just to think about, and we had the conversation earlier, so I don't know if it was before you popped on, the thinking about what you need to fund versus who really helps kind of separate the conversation in terms of that 10% cap, because it's allowable to pay for activities by contracting with somebody, or then to get creative in terms of how that activity is provided. So that can be helpful.
Thank you. And I apologize. I know this is probably in the emails you've sent, and I'm just not in front of my computer right now. The 50,000 was for 2 years, 3 years, 1 year?
1 year.
1 year. Okay.
Yeah, we're breaking it into project years, so that's 1 year of funding. I know, like in Natrona, just past conversations on the CJSB and just some work up there too, like transportation can be challenging. And if there's a way to, even just get that need met, to get kids where they need to be, to get them the services they need to really stay out of moving further into the juvenile justice system, that would be an allowable expense.
Okay.
Other questions or thoughts?
Any thoughts, Mark?
No, I just, I want to hear the first 15 minutes or so, but I do have some ideas that Tucker and I will talk about as
Okay.
far as opportunities to fund some ideas that we've had in the past. So definitely interested.
No, we're here and available. So, and again, we're offering individual technical assistance. We don't want this to be challenging. So don't be intimidated at all or think that, submitting a proposal for an actual RFP, is meant to cause any, challenges, or that it's a super competitive process, because really our goal is to get these funds out to individual communities to, serve juveniles and improve upon what you all are already doing.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so with that being said, just to recap, the RFP will be sent out come Monday, and that will go out to CJSBs, as well as will be posted to YSAC's website, hopefully by Monday. It might be a couple days after that, depending on when IT can get that up. And then we're hoping to have it posted on the SACJJ website as well. There will be links in there on this on that webpage, YSAC's webpage, to allow people to access yesterday's recording as well as today's recording, and then just a direct link to that RFP. So it was nice
Thank
chatting
you.
with you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks,
Good
everybody.
day.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks,
Thank
thanks
you.
for your good work. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.
You too. Bye.
Bye.